I have a confession to make. I avoided flash photography for a long time, and I wasn't really motivated to figure it out because I thought I loathed pictures that use flash. You know the ones I'm talking about? That deer in the headlights, awful tabloid look. I didn't want to take those kind of photos, and so I avoided this. But really, as a natural light photographer, I just found it intimidating. You can't see what you're doing. You're shooting blind, and you don't know whether it worked until you take the picture, and if it doesn't work, you don't know why it didn't. It's like magic. And when we think of something as magic, that's a problem because it's not really the gear that's complicated. This is actually pretty simple to use. It's more about a simple framework to master flash photography in your mind and covering how to use the tools along the way. And I'm a big advocate that the best way to learn is to just start taking pictures. I'm gonna start by mounting my flash to my camera, turn it on. We're in business, almost. Just 1 second. There we go. Now you can kind of hopefully see what's going on. So we know that there is a white balance setting for flash specifically. So we'll just choose the preset. You're gonna have an f4, shutter speed of 125, and ISO of 1000. How many is it taking? Right. Apparently I had that set to more than one. And that looks decidedly awful. Even worse than a tabloid. We're overexposed. All right, so I just need to pause it right there because I'm realizing some of you might be thinking, I don't need to watch a video to learn how to take bad photos. Just hang in there. By the end of the video, we will be taking pictures like these, and you will be well on your way to mastering flash photography. But in order to take good flash photos, we first need to take bad photos, learn why they're bad and how to fix it. And in the second half of the video, we'll apply what we've learned by taking a number of pictures in different setups, using different techniques around the house so that that knowledge actually sticks. I just thought that needed some clarity, so let's get back to the video. All right, so what happened here? How do we turn that into an amazing photo? The secret is balancing your available light with your speed light, because the available light is still working into your photo. So I like to think of the available light as my fill light. It's the light that's going to determine the shadows in my photo. And my flash is what determines my key light, or the brightest light source in my photo. And that is how I like to use my flash most of the time. Occasionally you're going to run into a situation where you're in broad daylight or something and it's too bright. Your flash isn't going to be able to overpower it, in which case it's just inverted. This becomes your fill light, the natural light becomes your key light. For the best results, this is your key light. All right, armed with that knowledge, let's try and improve our photo. So the first thing then that we're gonna do is set our camera settings to expose for our shadow light. So I actually want my settings pretty low. So I'm gonna leave my shutter at 125, and I'm gonna drop my ISO to 400. I think I'd be happy with that background. And so the next thing we're gonna do is adjust our flash so that it exposes in a better, the way it should. All right, so this is a really cheap, newer flash, which means its settings are really basic, but also very easy to understand. And it's as simple as moving it up to higher flash output or down to a lower flash output. So I'm gonna turn this all the way down to its lowest setting. Put that back on there. See what happens when we take a picture. Looking better, a lot better exposure, but it's still a pretty lame photo. I would much rather use available light than take that picture right there. Because essentially there are 4 problems that we have to overcome with flash photography: light source size, light source location, diffusion, and white balance. So one of the biggest things you can do to make flash photography look natural and not like flash photography is to get that flash further away from the lens. In almost no natural light, real life situation, except a deer that's about to get hit by a car, do you have a light right there in that perspective for a photo. Having an external flash like this mounted on the camera and then set up that extra 6 inches above the camera goes a long way in offsetting that light from a built-in flash. But it's still pretty close to the lens. And so one solution is to take this flash right off the camera and use one of these to trigger this. And I will set this on these shelves here just off camera. And we'll try and take that picture and see what happens. And already that is looking way better. But maybe you're finding this light a little bit hard, which brings us to the second problem of light source size. Because a little tiny light source like this isn't exactly natural. A lot of the light that we experience is actually bouncing off things, which means that it's very soft. Now, almost every flash is going to have a built-in solution for this. Is actually the same solution that we might use if we didn't have this transmitter and we wanted to simulate the light source coming from somewhere other than our camera. And that is bounce. And bouncing your Speedlight is one of the most important tools to a flash photographer. So almost every flash is going to have a head that can pivot and turn, and that allows you to bounce the light off of your environmental surroundings back onto your subject. And when you do that, you not only simulate the light coming from a different location than your camera, it diffuses the light and gives you a much softer light on your subject. So if I'm taking a picture of you, right now my flash is just straight at you during the headlights. But at weddings and other events, you might have seen where a photographer has their flash pointing almost straight up. Think of it kind of like playing pool, where you want to bounce the light off of a surface and back to your target. My favorite is to bounce off of a wall. So in this case, when I fire the flash, I'm bouncing off that wall and it's coming back to you, giving you a beautiful diffused light that looks like it came from anywhere but your camera. So let's give it a try on our photo right here. Because you're bouncing off of a wall, you're going to need more light. So I'm just going to go ahead and turn this up 2 settings. Just play with it. It's something that'll quickly come with experience. Actually, thinking about it, there's not much of a wall over here. There's a dark door and things. Over this wall, over this side, I think will work better. So we're going to try and point the flash that way. Just a better surface for bouncing off of. There we go. That is looking like a lot more natural light. And the last reason that a flash photo sometimes looks like paparazzi is that a flash is daylight balance. And if you're shooting in a dark environment, that often means that you're shooting with warm tungsten light. And so the light color doesn't mesh. Or maybe you're shooting in an office building and everything's fluorescent. And sometimes you can get away with it because your flash is the key light and then your fill light is just a little off. But depending on how much available light you're using, that doesn't always work. And so if you find yourself shooting in those situations often, these little color transforming filters just snap right onto your flash. And now I'm shooting with tungsten light. Next, I want to show you a few scenarios around the house using the flash, just so you can see how it works in a real life application. There are a lot of other settings in your camera, but for getting started, you really don't need to know most of that stuff. That's enough yapping. Let's go take a few photos. All right, so it's now dark in our house and I'm going to take a portrait of Jill and I'm going to be using this wall as the bounce for my flash. Because this is a large surface, it's going to create some nice soft light on her face. So I'm going to set for my ambient light. I'm actually going to push my ISO up to 8,000. That is pretty noisy in this environment, still pretty dark. But when the flash ends up in there, it'll pretty much have no noise on the bright parts of the image where it really counts. And it'll even minimize the noise in the dark parts. Shutter of 120, f4 as usual, because that's what this lens does. So I'll just take a picture without the flash so you can see what that looks like. So for my flash, I've got it on my lowest setting. I'm taking this picture so close to the wall that if I just have it straight, that's gonna be too bright, too much power off the wall onto her face. So I'm actually just gonna point it up a little bit. That'll put some light up onto the ceiling and back into the room so it's just not a black void behind her. Take that picture. And alternatively, because I've got a wall behind me and a ceiling that's white up here, I can just point it back and I can try bouncing that way. It's not quite so bright on her face, so both options work pretty well here, I think, as far as results. So in this setup, I wanted to use an off-camera flash, so I'm using the transmitter, and I have put the flash up here in the window so that it is bouncing off the glass. I had to experiment with that a fair bit because it's just a little bit of an unusual place to put your flash, but it bounces off the glass, comes back at Jill, giving her a little bit of a backlight, but still also bouncing enough around in the room that there is light on her face. So I'll take one picture here just without the flash so that you can see what the ambient light is doing. So as you can see, that's super dark. I'm barely capturing any available light, any ambient light in the room. Shutter of 125, f4, ISO 2500, flash white balance. Jill's cringing.
The Calvin.
But she likes Calvin. I like my presets. So I'll just turn on my transmitter here. And the flash itself is powered at just over half power. And you can see how that just gives it this natural soft light coming from almost behind her. Still obviously nighttime, but it, I don't know, just makes a really cool moody photo. And for our third setup, we're doing another candid shot of Jill on the couch. One of the safest and easiest ways to bounce light is just to point your flash up and bounce it off the roof and down onto the subject. One way to slightly improve that is just to twist it a little bit, just one notch. I don't know if you could see that. Just twist it one, and that will just make the light come from a little bit to one side or the other and just give a little bit more dynamic in your image while still having the advantages of bouncing off the ceiling and coming down onto the subject. So we're going to use that technique. So we'll start by setting up for our available light. I've adjusted my ISO to 10,000, and I will take the picture without flash to show you what that looks like. So we've got some ambient light happening. We'll turn on our flash. With those settings, I can have the flash relatively low power to get a good result. Set my white balance to flash. But one of the things you might notice in that photo is that the background, because of all this tungsten light in the room, is pretty warm compared to the flash color, which is daylight balanced. So to just clean the image up a little bit, we are going to use our tungsten filter. We'll clip that on here. When we do that, we're going to lose a little bit of light. So I'm just going to bump the light up, basically from the lowest setting to the second lowest setting. And of course, we are going to change our white balance now to tungsten or incandescent, the light bulb preset. What would that be, Calvin?
About 3200.
And we will take that picture again. And you can see the difference, not so much in Jill's skin tone, but in the background there. That the background now just looks more natural because we're matching our flash color balance to the environmental color balance that we were picking up. And it just looks that little bit better. And I just wanted to say, if you do have any questions about flash photography, lighting, photography in general, leave a comment down below. I'll try to answer as many of those as I can. Thanks for hanging out with me today, by the way. If you have made it this far through the video, can you just leave a thumbs up down below? And I think that concludes this video, so we'll see you guys again very soon.